The truth is, we can't really make an absolute statement of what happened to the 9th Legion until archaeology uncovers some new groundbreaking evidence.
The 9th Legion was one of Rome's most feared and respected armies. They had fought under Julius Caesar.
It has been decreed by the new Senate that the title of dictator, Julius Caesar,
crushed revolts, and built the forts that anchored the empire's frontiers. Then, without warning, they vanished from history.
In the early 2nd century AD, a Roman legion vanished from the historical record.
There was no record of disbandment or no final battle celebrated. For centuries, theories have ranged from annihilation in the wild north of Britain to quiet reassignment on distant frontiers. But recently, a terrifying discovery in the Scottish Highlands uncovered evidence that rewrites everything we thought we knew. What happened to the 9th was way worse than we thought. The Legion of Legends. For over a century, the 9th Legion, Legio IX Hispana, was one of the most feared and dependable forces in the Roman army. In an empire where entire provinces depended on the strength of its legions, the 9th was often sent where resistance was strongest. They earned their reputation not by chance, but through brutal efficiency in war, crushing rebellions, and enforcing Rome's will without hesitation. The legion's rise began under Julius Caesar during the bloody campaigns in Gaul. Here, they fought in battles where entire villages were burned, and survivors were taken as slaves to break the will of resisting tribes. They endured winter campaigns in freezing conditions, laying siege to fortified hill towns, cutting off food supplies, and forcing surrender through starvation. When Caesar faced the massive Gallic uprising under Vercingetorix, the 9th took part in the siege of Alesia, surrounding the enemy with walls and towers, while fending off relief forces in one of the most coordinated and relentless assaults of the era. The title Hispana came from their campaigns in Spain, where local tribes used the mountains and forests to their advantage. The 9th countered with scorched earth tactics, destroying crops and livestock to starve their opponents into submission. They hunted rebels into remote valleys, building temporary fortifications to block escape routes and systematically capturing or killing resistance leaders. Spain was not just a test of military strength, but of psychological warfare, and the 9th proved willing to use both.
Each and every one of you will get his share. We have given our souls to this place for 8 years.
In 43 AD, during the invasion of Britain ordered by Emperor Claudius, the 9th was part of the initial strike force. They fought the Catuvelauni and other tribes in close, muddy terrain, cutting down warriors with short swords after breaking their shield walls. Once the island was taken, the 9th was left to hold it. Holding Britain meant constant patrols, sudden raids on hostile settlements, and punishing those who resisted with executions, destruction of villages, and forced labor. Their most notorious action in Britain came during the revolt of Boudica, around 60 AD. The rebellion saw Roman settlements burned and thousands killed. The 9th marched to suppress it and was ambushed, losing a large part of their force. Survivors regrouped, and when reinforcements came, they participated in the crushing of the rebellion. This was not a clean victory. Entire communities were annihilated, and survivors were enslaved to ensure no future uprising.
Once Caesar was consul, how many times did he push through a law without having it ratified?
Something.
And right away.
After the rebellion, they fortified their position. The 9th became central to the construction of permanent forts and roads, including a major base at Lincoln. These were not just military installations, but symbols of occupation, complete with storage for grain seized from local populations and barracks for rapid deployment into hostile territory. By the late 1st century, under Governor Agricola, the 9th advanced into Caledonia, modern-day Scotland. The tribes here were skilled in ambush and avoided open battles. The 9th responded with systematic destruction of villages, burning fields, and capturing strongholds to strip the enemy of resources. They pushed deeper into the north than any Roman force before them, building forts in dangerous territory to intimidate local leaders into submission. For decades, the 9th Legion represented Rome's ability to conquer and hold the most defiant regions. They operated with a blend of military precision, harsh discipline, and calculated brutality. They were not only soldiers but enforcers of imperial policy.
I've made my decision. I'm going to Rome. I'm going to cross the Rubicon.
Capable of erasing entire communities if it served Roman control. But then something shocking happened. After surviving the most violent campaigns of the Republic and Empire, the 9th vanished. The mystery begins in the very land they helped to conquer, a land that, as later evidence suggests, may have been the trap that finally swallowed the 9th Legion whole. Vanished from the scrolls. By AD 108, the 9th Legion was stationed at York, guarding Rome's northern frontier in Britain. That year, something happened that would set them on a path from which they would never return. Archaeological and historical clues point to a major tribal uprising, possibly involving the Brigantes, the most powerful tribe in Britain, and the warlike Caledonians from the north. The 9th may have been ordered to march out and crush the rebellion before it spread. If so, they were heading into hostile, unforgiving country. Boggy ground, thick forests, and bitter weather that favored the tribes. The enemy may have had overwhelming numbers and the advantage of fighting on home terrain. For a legion used to discipline and order, the chaos of guerrilla warfare could turn the tide quickly. What happened next is the black hole in Roman history. There are no surviving reports, no victory inscriptions, no lists of casualties, nothing after that year. Not a single source mentions them returning to York. To historians, that silence speaks volumes. It likely means the 9th Legion was wiped out in the field, their standards captured, their men slaughtered or taken as slaves. If that's true, the tribes had won a stunning victory over Rome. Rome may have chosen to bury the truth, sparing itself the humiliation of admitting that an entire legion had been annihilated. For an empire as vast as Rome, order and record-keeping were the lifeblood of military power. Every legion, from the most celebrated to the most obscure, was meticulously tracked. Their names appeared on rolls for pay, honors, and deployment orders. Campaign victories were carved into stone, and even defeats were usually documented in some form. A legion was not merely a fighting unit, but a permanent fixture in the administrative machine that could be traced from its founding to its final days.
Has its fair share of extraordinary Roman history, today underneath York Minster.
That is why the disappearance of the 9th Legion from these records is so staggering. By the time the official lists of legions appear in the early 2nd century, the Aich Hispana is missing entirely. There is no mention of its reassignment, no note of its disbandment, not even the dishonorable mark of disgrace. It is as if an entire military unit of several thousand men, their officers, their banners, their histories, suddenly vanished into thin air. To make it worse, Roman historians of the era who delighted in chronicling the empire's triumphs and setbacks alike seem to skip over the 9th's fate entirely. Tacitus, whose works cover much of the 1st century, ends his histories before the legion's disappearance. Later writers, such as Cassius Dio, make no reference to its end.
This is the wonderful tomb marker of an individual called Lucius Ducius Rufinus.
The silence is deafening, and for generations it was simply assumed that the 9th had been formally disbanded after a long service life. But now, in a shocking development, the mystery has finally been solved. But before that, there were failed trails and attempts. But now, in a shocking turn, new evidence has brought us closer than ever to the truth. Yet, before this breakthrough, decades of investigation led only to dead ends and frustrating false trails. The failed trails. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the theory that the 9th had been annihilated in Britain, perhaps during a catastrophic ambush by northern tribes, grew stronger. The idea captured the imagination of scholars and storytellers alike, because it fit the romantic image of a doomed Roman army marching into the mists of Caledonia, never to return. But the evidence refused to cooperate. In the late 19th century, a site in northern Britain was announced as the Ninth's massacre ground. Skeletal remains, weapons, and signs of destruction seemed to promise an answer. Yet, detailed investigation revealed the remains were medieval, not Roman. The massacre theory lost one of its strongest pillars. Then came an intriguing discovery of fragments of roof tiles stamped with the 9th Legion's mark, found in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. These dated to after the supposed annihilation in Britain. Could the Legion have been transferred to the Rhine frontier? The find sparked new hope, but it quickly faded. Nijmegen yielded no further records of their presence. It was as if they had appeared briefly, then vanished again. Other leads brought only frustration. In the 1970s, archaeologists uncovered a Roman marching camp in Scotland. Some speculated it might be linked to the 9th's last campaign. But there were no signs of a battle. There were no arrowheads, no mass burials, or no scorched earth. The site told no definitive story. Even more tantalizing were the small human-scale traces. In northern Britain, gravestones bearing Latin inscriptions spoke of Roman soldiers who never went home, a phrase that hinted at tragedy but offered no specifics. Oral traditions among local communities kept alive stories of foreign warriors who perished in the wilderness, though centuries of retelling had blurred their details. One of the strangest pieces of the puzzle came from Vindolanda, a fort just south of Hadrian's Wall. Among the famous writing tablets found, there was a curse. It was a magical text meant to bring ruin upon the unnamed wrongdoers. The language suggests betrayal within a military context. It is not proof, but it raises the unsettling possibility that the 9th's end was hastened from within. Time and again, the trail to the 9th led to promising clues that dissolved under scrutiny. For historians and archaeologists, it was a maddening chase, with each lead hinting at answers, but stopping short of revealing the full truth. The fate of the 9th remained a shadow, glimpsed only in fragments, as if someone had deliberately scattered its story to the winds. To follow this mystery to its end, we must examine the theories born from these scattered signs. And these theories that take us into the most unexpected corners of Rome's history. Theories of the Fall. Theories about the fate of the 9th Legion have always been tangled in speculation and fragments of evidence. One is the Eastern deployment theory, the idea that the Legion was sent to one of Rome's most dangerous war zones, such as Judea during the Jewish revolts, or Armenia against Parthia. Both fronts devoured Roman lives in sieges and ambushes, and a legion could disappear there without a trace if its loss was too politically damaging to record. The problem is that while these wars are well documented, none mention the 9th by name.
Complete the conquest until Caratacus is brought back in Rome in chains or is dead.
If they fought there, their part in the story was erased along with their bodies. Another view is far less dramatic, yet chilling in its own way. Gradual dissolution. Instead of a single catastrophic event, the Legion may have been worn down over years by minor skirmishes, disease, and desertion. As numbers dwindled, replacements went to other units, until what remained of the 9th was quietly absorbed into the broader army. This would explain the lack of a final battle record, but it is difficult to reconcile with Rome's notoriously meticulous paperwork. Why would the process be so completely absent? The Nijmegen tiles complicate things further. Their brief appearance in the Netherlands raises questions. If the 9th had been transferred there after leaving Britain, why did it vanish from the records almost immediately? Were these the last fragments of a shattered unit sent to the Rhine frontier as expendable troops? Or had the Legion already been mortally weakened before arriving? The possibility that it lingered in a strange limbo still active in the field, but erased from official rosters, is disturbing. It would mean the 9th's end was not a single decisive moment, but a slow disappearance deliberately hidden from public view.
9th Legions. So the first 9th Legion originates in the 80s BC in the social wars in the later Roman Republic.
In that case, their loss was not just military, but an act of historical erasure. And then there's the theory that refuses to die, the Britain theory, which surged again in popularity in the 2020s. It begins with the Ninth's last confirmed posting in Eboracum, modern York. From there, modern historians believe the Legion marched north into hostile territory, Caledonia, now Scotland, to crush a major rebellion. They would have been crossing into land Rome never truly conquered, facing fierce tribal warriors in their home terrain. In this telling, the Ninth never returned. There were no survivors, no bodies, only silence. While no battlefield or mass grave has ever been found, the drama of an elite Roman legion vanishing on home turf within Britain's borders is irresistible. Yet, for all its allure, this theory has always lacked one thing: proof. Each theory solves part of the puzzle but leaves dark gaps in the record. Did the Ninth perish in the deserts of Judea, the mountains of Armenia, or the forests of Caledonia? Were they destroyed outright or quietly erased from history in a bureaucratic sleight of hand? For decades, historians argued, but then came the breakthrough discovery that upended everything and confirmed what many had feared all along: the shocking discovery. In 2025, a joint team of British and European archaeologists set out to test drone-mounted LiDAR and multispectral imaging over a seldom-visited stretch of the Scottish Highlands. The terrain was thick with centuries of vegetation and layered peat, making ground surveys almost useless. When the processed images came back, they revealed something that had been invisible to the naked eye. It was the faint but unmistakable outline of a Roman marching camp. The site was large enough to hold about 5,000 soldiers. Its shape matched the precise geometry of Roman military engineering, with a rectangle with rounded corners. But there were irregularities. Several of the perimeter trenches had been started and then left unfinished. Some corners showed no trace of defensive ditches at all, as if the builders had been interrupted or forced to rush. Excavations immediately followed. Archaeologists uncovered scattered hobnails from Roman military boots, pieces of segmented armor, and bent bronze fittings from shields. The distribution of finds was unusual. Clusters of Caledonian-style arrowheads were found inside the camp boundaries rather than outside, suggesting the attack happened after the legionaries had set up camp. It raised the possibility of an ambush that penetrated the defenses, perhaps even a night assault. For decades, this location had escaped detection because of its remoteness, the density of the vegetation, and the way peat had altered the surface over time. Traditional field walking and aerial photography in past decades never caught the subtle soil compression or hidden structural traces. Only the combination of LiDAR mapping and spectral analysis, which can detect minute changes in vegetation growth caused by buried features, brought the camp into view. The most hotly debated discovery lay near the heart of the site was a stone-lined pit holding the base of what appeared to be a Roman standard. Unusually, the base had been placed upside down. The decorative top, such as the legion's eagle, was missing, but the inverted position was unmistakable. In Roman military tradition, turning a standard upside down was a powerful and shameful symbol. It was widely understood, even if not officially written into regulations, to mean that the unit had been utterly defeated or disgraced in battle. To Roman soldiers, this would have been the ultimate mark of humiliation, a silent, unmistakable signal that the legion it represented was finished. Even more startling, there was no mass grave here and no clear lines of a pitched battle. Instead, the pattern of evidence suggested disorder. An elite unit was under pressure, possibly isolated, and struck in a way that denied them the ability to regroup. The camp may never have been fully completed before disaster struck. For historians of the Ninth Legion, this was the most tangible physical link yet to their possible final days in Britain. It also carried unsettling implications. This did not look like the site of a heroic last stand, but rather of a force caught off guard and left without support to be slaughtered. This hints that the Legion's disappearance might not have been caused by enemies alone. What if the Ninth was not simply defeated here, but abandoned to its fate by the government's decision? Why, it is way worse than we thought. The recent discovery finally offered historians what they had long hoped for, a credible location for the final days of the Ninth Legion. But what shocked researchers most wasn't the site itself. It was the silence around it.
It had ended in success. The Emperor Claudius, he had his conquest. But for the Ninth, the fighting was far from over.
For nearly 2,000 years, the fate of one of Rome's most famous legions had vanished from all historical records. And now, the few physical clues we do have suggest this wasn't just a tragic loss. It was likely covered up on purpose. By the early 2nd century AD, the empire was changing. Emperor Hadrian, who came to power in 117 AD, moved away from his predecessor's aggressive expansionist policies. He prioritized defending what the empire already controlled, not gaining more territory. As part of this shift, Hadrian often restructured military forces to match his new defensive mindset. The Ninth Legion, known for bold, aggressive tactics, may not have fit into this new plan. Their leadership was filled with men trained under an older, more expansion-focused system. Sending them into the unstable, rebellious north of Britain may not have just been a tactical move. It may have been a way to remove a unit that no longer aligned with the government's changing priorities. Some historians argue that this wasn't just bad luck. It could have been part of a quiet purge. A unit seen as too aggressive or too closely tied to older imperial values might have been viewed as a threat to Hadrian's new order. Adding to this tension was the fact that many soldiers in the Ninth had been stationed in Britain for years. Some had married local women and started families. Over time, their loyalty may have started to blur, not just between soldier and citizen, but between empire and native tribe. To the government, this merging of cultures might have looked like dangerous contamination. But here's where things get truly strange. Despite the clear signs of an ambush at the 2025 site, such as hastily dug trenches, shield fittings, scattered arrowheads, no bodies were found. Not a single mass grave, not even a pile of bones buried under layers of peat. For a legion-sized force, this absence is alarming. So what happened to the bodies? According to historians, there are a few possibilities. Some speculate that the Caledonians, the native tribes who likely launched the attack, burned or scattered the bodies to send a message. Another is that the fallen were dragged off, one by one in the chaos, left to decay in the forest and vanish into the soft, acidic soil over centuries. But both theories feel incomplete. There should have been at least some remains, especially inside a fortified Roman camp. A more chilling theory is that the imperial government stepped in afterward not to recover and honor the dead, but to erase the entire incident. If the Ninth had been wiped out in an ambush, deep behind enemy lines, with no reinforcements and no escape, it would have looked like a major failure. That kind of defeat would have damaged the emperor's image. Hadrian wanted to project control, peace, and intelligent leadership, not reckless losses. In that case, hiding the truth would serve a political purpose. And the imperial government had the tools to do it. They could order provincial officials to remove the Ninth from active records. Memorials and monuments could be destroyed or quietly repurposed. Surviving soldiers might be reassigned under new identities. Military reports could be intercepted before reaching the Senate or Roman public. Slowly, the entire unit could vanish not through time, but through intentional erasure. This is why the Ninth's fate remained unsolved for so long. It didn't just disappear, it was scrubbed out. Even now, with a probable location uncovered, we're left with more questions than answers. If the Ninth really died in that Highland camp, why weren't they remembered as heroes? Why weren't they commemorated, even as a cautionary tale? The answer may be that their end wasn't noble. It may have been inconvenient, humiliating, or politically dangerous, and someone made sure no one would ever find out, until now. This makes the story far worse than anyone imagined. Not just a tragic defeat, but an orchestrated silence. When loyalty is disposable, the 9th Legion followed orders. They built roads through hostile lands, raised forts in the rain and fog, buried their brothers, and fought until their shields cracked and their limbs gave out. And when the call came to march north one more time, they did. Not because they expected glory, but because they believed they mattered. But what if they didn't? The silence that followed the 9th Legion's final march tells a story far darker than defeat. It suggests something worse than betrayal. It suggests they were used and discarded. That all their victories, scars, and years of obedience meant nothing the moment they stopped being convenient. This wasn't the loss of a battle. This was the quiet decision that those men no longer fit the future their leaders wanted. A future of control, not chaos. Of walls, not conquest. And so their loyalty was repaid with silence, and their sacrifice buried beneath peat and politics. They were given no honors and no graves. History speaks often of fallen soldiers. But this isn't a story of soldiers who fell. It's a story of men deliberately erased not for failure, but for interfering with the image of power. The cost of that silence ripples outward. Their families waited for word that never came. Generations grew up not knowing what became of their fathers and brothers, and the rest of us inherited a history carefully cleaned of its shame. That's the price of silence. It makes the powerful feel untouchable. It teaches the loyal that loyalty is a risk. It turns legions into ghosts. And when the truth finally cracks through as it did in 2025, it doesn't bring closure. It brings the horror of realization. These men were not remembered because they were not meant to be. The 9th Legion didn't vanish into the mists. They were pushed there, and the world simply looked away. And now, even with the site discovered, most of what is known continues to surface, only in fragments. The details are not yet widely publicized. Instead, they are quietly circulating within academic circles, discussed cautiously in closed-door forums and unpublished reports. What has been uncovered so far is being carefully reviewed, not yet released to the broader public. But investigations are ongoing. Excavation teams are still on site, and new layers of evidence are being brought to light. Internal reviews are underway, and there are indications that official findings may be published soon. In the coming weeks or months, confirmation may arrive not just of what happened, but of why it was buried. And if that truth is fully exposed, what follows could be even more horrifying than we are prepared to face. What do you think about this discovery? Feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Want more videos like this? Then subscribe to the channel for more eye-opening stories. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. See you in the next video.